Okay, we're now going to have a conversation with regards to community safety, a very important conversation. What we're hoping is that everyone will actively listen to others while they speak. If there's disagreement, please, understand that different people in our community have different perspectives. So it's important to respect those perspectives, even if you might not agree with them. So our first conversation is going to focus on the 50 Regent Park Boulevard incident, which happened on Sunday, November 21st, 2021. So some context: youth were invited by grassroots youth organizations to provide feedback with regards to the potential rezoning and the revitalization of Regent Park, specifically phases 4 and 5. So residents were asked, specifically youth in this situation were asked for feedback. So on Sunday, November 21st, a prank was also, happened, just like we had at the beginning of this meeting. And the response, as you could see on various social media YouTube videos that have been circulated, was a heavy presence of Toronto Police Services. There were minors involved. And what we are hoping to do is talk about that incident. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing the screen so we could better be able to see everyone. And then what we'll do is we'll take points and questions from the audience. Yasmine, I'm hoping that's an old hand, Yasmine.
Yes, my pin is not working. Bengali interpreter. I send message, but it is not working.
Okay.
The number I got in email.
Yeah.
And the number she said, the same number, but it is not working. And I'm just sitting and sending messages.
Okay, good to know, Yasmine. Thank you so much for letting me know. I'm going to ask someone to help you on the chat, okay?
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so we're going to get started with this conversation. So I would like to ask the youth or youth workers, whoever was at 50 Regent Park Boulevard to tell the community, to tell all of us as allies what happened. We're here to listen, and we're here to actively support our youth who have been meeting to discuss this incident as well. So who'd like to go first? So for the youth workers or anyone who was on site who would like to speak.
I guess I'll speak. So exactly what had happened during that event at 50 Regents, just to give you guys some context, was the assumption that there was a call for a prank. Well, there was a call for a knife, which was what was indicated prior when the cops came. And it was for 9 males, well, boys, that were on the 9th floor or some 8th floor, not too sure what floor. And somebody had seen a knife, which is why the call was made. Now the police responded. 2 officers responded, came to the building, and one came with, I believe, an assault rifle, and the other one was his backup, I guess, partner. And as the kids came out of the elevator, they pointed that assault rifle at the youth, who complied, were not aggressive or anything, aimed it at them, told them to sit down, which they did. And then another, I believe, 7 officers arrived, including the sergeant, who went further to ask them for their information, check if they had any weapons, and go from there. As we seen what was transpiring, we came out, we were asking questions, we were asking the reason for the aggressiveness and for the assault rifle, trying to get an understanding of the situation. They said that there was a call for knives. Now this call for a knife is a general call that it may mean one knife or multiple knives. And when asking to remove the assault rifle, the sergeant said, "Don't tell me what to do," and became hostile in terms of him doing his job. Now, after that, another 6 officers were coming through, which he then told them not to. He actually told them to stay outside. And as the information went further, or as more information was being gathered, because they were talking to the residents upstairs, they found out that it was a call for a ding dong ditch or a Nicky Nine door, whatever you guys want to call it. And there may have been a knife that was seen. So basically nothing was found. There was no knife or anything. And they said it wasn't a false call because of the fact that the way we can, how can I say, interpret the situation, they did do Nicky Nine door and there may have been a knife, but they weren't too sure because they were scared. So yeah, that's what transpired. And
Kevin,
yeah.
I have a question for you if you don't mind, because I know you're on site. Could you tell us more about how the youth interacted with TPS? How, because you said they were scared, they were afraid. Did you in any way try to intervene, and what was the response?
Yeah, the youth were scared. They were, I think, 2 were in tears, and they were complying, right? So there was no need for aggression. And I guess the response from the officers, there was a lack of, good communication in that aspect because they were aggressive. And it was just trying to get some information as to why the call was made, why the aggression was needed, why the assault rifle was needed, why so many officers were needed. And they took more of a hostile approach instead of speaking, in the manner that we were speaking to them, right? So yeah, definitely not a tasteful conversation. Definitely some stuff needs to be changed in that aspect, but yeah, it wasn't a very it wasn't a very good conversation on their part.
Okay, perfect. And were there other youth workers or youth leaders on site? And because I know the youth always look up to our youth workers and youth leaders, right? They're the point of contact, apart from their family or their parents. So I'm just wondering if other youth leaders, I know some of us, and I actually just want to provide some context before I start reading the stuff on the chat from some of the youth workers. We've actually were very intentional in reaching out to the youth. And a lot of them wanted to meet in person because of this pandemic and this Omicron variants. We didn't think it was safe for us to meet in person, but we will have those conversations after this meeting. So for everyone who's part of this meeting, rest assured that other youth will be followed up on, specifically the ones that wanted to share their thoughts about that incident and this at this meeting. So I see some comments on the chat. For Yusuf, they said they told youth workers not to tell them how to do their job and were very hostile. Thank you, Yusuf, for saying that on the chat. So that's another observation that was made between the interactions of Toronto Police Services and the youth workers, which must change. Does anyone else want to add something about that incident at 50 Regent Park Boulevard? Leah, anyone else? Okay, I see a comment on the chat. I tried to intervene in this situation by telling the one officer that the guns weren't necessary, but the police were very hostile and didn't care what any of us had to say. Okay, thank you, Abdi Fatah, for mentioning that. Anyone else? Another reflection was there were community resource officers there, but they were useless. They just followed the lead of their colleagues. Okay, good to know.
Sorry. So off of what some of the youth leaders are mentioning here, I also was there and saw just when the youth leaders were just trying to tell them like these are their youth to just, you know, what's going on. They didn't even give them a chance. They just kind of yelled at them, I'm doing my investigation. Don't interfere and whatnot. It was a TCHC event. So the TCHC staff were present and they realized that this was it was a little bit too much force because they were there as well. And they you know, they were talking to them and they had a lot more respect for the TCHC staff
Okay.
than they did for the youth leaders that were there. Pretty much any racialized person that was there, it was like nobody was getting like respected at all. They were just not even they weren't really understanding. And then it was when the youth leader eventually mentioned to the staff after the officer, when they realized like, you know, this was a prank, it was a misunderstanding, they still kind of had like the weapons and like the rifle, the assault looking rifle, they still had it. So it was a youth leader that had to tell the TCHC staff, could you tell them to put it away? Then they whispered to her, put it away. Then she finally did. But it took the youth leaders to actually see the fear in the youth. Like, could you put it away now that you know there's no issue and whatnot. So just a little bit more stuff. It was just the youth leaders were not treated with respect. TCHC staff was treated with respect. And yeah, pretty much.
Okay, so there was no respect given. There was no respect given to the youth leaders or the youth workers or those that were responsible for those youth while their parents were working, right?
Yeah.
Or were away. Very important information.
Some of the youth leaders were calling other youth leaders in the community to come and like identify the children and to help out. And then eventually after everything dispersed, they were talking to the youth leaders that were called because they weren't respecting the ones that were there. So they called other youth leaders that weren't there. Maybe if they came in and spoke, then they would have some sort of understanding and whatnot. So, and it was a big scene. There was like everybody was outside. It was embarrassing, right? To the youth.
Okay. I see a comment on the chat. The officers responding to these calls need to do a better job in identifying youth leaders or workers. That's very constructive and positive. Thank you, Abdi Fatah, for mentioning that. Do the neighborhood officers, do the police or the people who are responsible for safety and security, do they even know who the youth workers or leaders are? Excellent. Alicia, go ahead.
I had a quick question. The community officer is the same as, sorry, in the chat it says the community resource officer. Is that the same as the neighborhood police?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, they definitely, there's no connection. Do they know who the youth leaders are?
That's a good question that we should pose.
I don't think they
know.
do. I think they know some of them, but not all of them.
Okay, but I do know from incidents that sometimes, actually most of the time, the neighborhood police are not, they can't pull rank in any situation. So there needs to be sort of some dialogue or how these neighborhood police, when they're actually good neighborhood police and actually situated in the neighborhood, getting to know people more, how do they properly intervene? Because there's been many incidents where other officers show up and it's like, oh yeah, we can't really do anything or say anything. And it's like, isn't that your purpose, to sort of mediate what is going on? But I just wanted to know like that, do they know the leaders and people like that? Do they have like a station, or they just come and walk around and then leave?
Excellent question. And I think those are things that we're noting down for future meeting on whether that, whether those relationships even exist. And actually, that's a very important point. So there's a question on the chat from Melissa. Thank you, Melissa. Did the youth workers have tags or cards on them? Like when I work with YMCA, I wear my tag. If I have to speak to a cop, I pull out my card and tell them I'm a youth worker and know this person intervened for safety. Thank you, Melissa. So was there any identification? Does anyone know?
So I get like they
didn't care, Yusuf says. Okay.
Just because I know, like, for example, if I have someone who's I've gone and intervened when someone is being arrested, a female, and they're all male police. I get on the floor on my knees and I hold my tag up, and it kind of alerts their eyes, because sometimes when people are doing their job, they're also in a heightened state, right? And maybe the cops go in heightened state, not saying that this was excusable or okay. So I think maybe in the future, if they weren't wearing like a thing around their neck where they can pull it out of the shirt, if it's hidden, just to have it, just to be like, to show that this is, they work with these youth, these are their kids.
Yeah, and just that's an excellent point. And just before we move on to Kevin's question, I see Yusuf has joined us from the Healing as One office space at Daniel Spectrum. So we do have some youth who are in that space joining us. So thank you for the youth that have just joined us to pay attention to this conversation. Go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, and to that point, and we definitely understand that, you know, cops are in a heightened situation, and definitely, you know, there's a lot going on, right? But the my concern is that a cop's job, and I guess their training, is to observe, analyze the situation, and understand what type of risk they're at, right? And I don't think the risk here was as heightened as they portrayed it to be, especially after they checked the youth. They've asked a certain questions and understood that, you know, this there's nothing to be found, and obviously there's an event going on, right? So I guess my concern towards, you know, I guess the whole situation, and, you know, for youth workers to have tags, you know, should we walk around 24/7 with it and just say, hey, you know what, I'm a youth worker, right? It shouldn't have to get to that point, right? A lot of people, you know, and the cops, you know, who are in our neighborhoods should know who we are, should understand, you know, what we're doing in this community, and just to analyze the situation itself should speak volumes, right? Because that's typically their job, right? For risk analysis purposes, right? So yeah, I to that point, I definitely understand where you're coming from, but there's no risk at all. They were compliant. They showed their pockets and what they had, and they gave them their information, right? So I'm not too sure why they wouldn't be able to have a civil conversation with people who are asking them the necessary questions about, you know, who are they looking for exactly? Why do they need the assault rifle? Why do they need so many officers? I think that's the point that we're trying to get at and trying to understand, because everything's on camera. They have it on their cameras, right, of the situation that's happened. So to say otherwise, and to say, you know, I don't know what the indication is that, you know, oh yeah, the youth leaders were you know, hostile themselves or doing whatever. You know, the proof is in the pudding, right? And at the end of the day, like, we can see the situation, we can see how it played out, and unfortunately, there's a lot of training needed on their part, right? So yeah, that's just my thought.
Excellent observations, Kevin. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm actually noting down everything you said. There's a question that was raised in the chat. Has the person who called the police been followed up with? It's an opportunity to talk about alternatives to the police and stress the risk or dangers of calling the police. Excellent point. So I'm going to ask everyone, has everyone seen the video? Please raise your hand. Remember how we raise your hand or no if you have it. Maybe we can quickly see it if people haven't seen it. Has everyone seen that video online? I know it's been circulating everywhere. I see some people saying yes, some people shaking no. Okay, good to know. And then has everyone seen the video from the person who called the police? Right? And sort of like the interaction with the youth. I guess not many of us have seen that. Okay, so I'm not sure if we've got time to share it, but I'm going to try to bring it up. But before that, let's just go through the rest of the points that were raised, because what we're trying to do is we're trying to find out exactly what happened. So I'm just going to quickly share on the screen. What are the two things that we're trying to get at? The two things that we're trying to get at are, what did the youth or minors experience, and what did the youth or workers experience? So we just talked about what the youth workers experienced. Now let's be more intentional about what the youth minors experienced. So the youth minors were not with specifically their parents, and with youth workers. So the youth workers were responsible. As you've heard from youth workers, the kids were scared. That's their first response. I believe they were searched. I'm not sure if any contact information was taken from them. That's something that will need to be confirmed by either the parents or TPS. So just to let people know that. Okay, so I see a lot of comments on the chat, a lot of interactions, which is great. So let's see who else has raised this question. Also have a question. What's the alternative for the person that called the police? I can think of many reasons why someone could be terrified or triggered by a random banging on their door. Yet I hope no one will want that kind of response to the youth that did that. What's the alternative? Because it seems like this really needs to be one for such things. Excellent point. Who would like to answer that question? What would be the alternative? So if a lady was to catch some kids knocking on her door late at night, what should be the first point of contact if you're living in TCHC, for example? So Toronto Community Housing. Let's be very specific. Miguel, go ahead.
Well, I think the starting point is to contact the community safety unit.
And how do you contact the community safety unit?
There is a number on display on the lobby in the main floor, how to contact the community safety unit for complaints in the buildings.
Okay, so TCHC, the community safety unit, correct?
Yeah. Yes.
And every building has its number, or here,
Yeah.
I'm just going to put this on the chat so that people can see what you're talking about. From Miguel.
Yep.
Okay, who else would like to go next? Miguel, is that an old hand?
No, yes, it's an all hand, brother. Sorry.
Who would like to answer this question? What do you do?
Tonight
416.
with all
What do you do when kids knock on a neighbor's door, knock on your door in the middle of the night?
Well,
Rashida, go ahead.
I just want to share something. I don't think if somebody knock on the door, anybody will call the police. So just keep that in mind. I'm pretty sure
Well said.
nobody called the police because they had a knock. So
Okay.
I just want to address that issue with you.
Okay. Thank you, Marshida, for saying that. Okay, who else would like to go next? Go ahead. Whoever's
Just put the
raised their hand,
number
go
on the
ahead.
screen.
Go ahead, my friend. F Healed. F Healed, go ahead. Your hand is up. Okay, so simple answer. Oh, Melissa, you want to go next? Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just wondering.
Oh, we have someone else. We
Do
have someone ahead of you. Go ahead, F Healed. Go ahead. You're unmuting. Go ahead.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, actually, I agree with my sister Murshida. I would not ever even call the security. I will go outside as a neighbor. Talk to those kids. They are kids. Eh? Talk to them,
Mhm.
and you can just you can get you can get to know them better.
Okay.
And you can just tell them, please, if you are playing, go play outside. Or please go home. Maybe your mom is, looking for you. Your parents are looking for you. Talk to them nicely.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't think this will come to this, but I am not surprised. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that. So as a parent and someone who loves your kids, I'm sure, I know that's coming from a good place. So good to know. Melissa, go ahead.
Sorry. Was this a scattered unit or something?
No,
No. I'm
Uh,
wondering, like, I agree. I think it's ludicrous for anyone to call police or security on a knock. So,
This-
when there's an event like this, so you got youth getting together, blah, 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 or any event, like really, do you guys have pamphlets that go up in the building for TCHC? Like, did it people know,
Yes,
people know in the
this-
community that there was going to be an event?
No, so to answer that question, TCHC does all the outreach for their events. So this was this was an event to explain the revitalization process for phases 4 and 5. So they went, so this is what they do. The Revite team has their data that they need to collect. So they actually got all the youth workers to get at least 80 to 100 youth
Oh,
to come out. So there was a lot of youth there, and TCHC is responsible to do the outreach. However, it's TCHC's responsibility, or anybody holding an event, to let the police know that this is what
Yeah.
we're doing, and if this is what you're doing, then like we may have a lot of youth coming, knowing like the history. Because just to give you an example, for the Access to Space Committee, we had an event the day before, and it was an event called We Hear You. There was some members of the collective group, the BCC, Neighborhood Information Post, just like a bunch of us came together. We personally called the NCOs to invite them and advise them that this is what we're doing. It was in 110 River Street. It's a TCHC building. Where the community center is in that building is on the same floor as where tenants live. And the youth from our event also went in the hallway at some point, right? So again, the police, the police were aware of our event on Saturday, and they advised us if somebody was to call in that day, they would not respond as if it was a random 911 call, because they would have been aware that youth would have been in the building. So
that's so
it's
sad.
up to the ones holding the event to advise TCH, to advise the local
Yeah.
police, knowing that they will come. If you call 911, it's people from all divisions coming, right? So it's not per se 51 division, or it's officers from all over. So they're gonna come there fully armed when they hear Black youth, when they hear 5 knives, when they hear like someone frantic about that. So that's why. And they did say that if they called in advance, if TCHC let us know, we would have not responded that way.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Okay, thank you so much for that question. Mark, go ahead, and then Fatma.
Hi there. This is Mark Tannelly with 31 Division's Community Police Liaison Committee. I actually came down to the event on Regent Park, the meeting with Engage 416, and I heard it was a great meeting, great conversation, and I love the youth's engagement. It was amazing. Just a couple of points with the discussion tonight. I have to think that from what I've heard from the community and from the police and from the actual officers that attended the scene, plus the recorded 911 calls, I don't think the police actually did anything that was out of line. They reported there was a call that was made for a weapon. A weapon call was made. So, and it's in a building, so there's many exits. So strategically, they're going to send as many officers as they can to that area to make sure that they've got to make sure that everyone is safe. They're going to have to go through the building. They're going to have to make sure that everything is clear. They got to do an investigation, right? And they have to make sure that no one is stabbed or dead somewhere in the building. They don't know that stuff until the investigation is done. Whether there's youth leaders there or not, unfortunately, while they're doing their investigations, just because you're a youth leader, it doesn't mean that you can interfere with an officer's investigation. While they're doing their thing, people have to step back and allow them to do their job. The rifle that they had out there, it's a tool, just as a handgun as well. And so no one was arrested. They did what they had to do, and everyone went home safe. Yes, it's a traumatic experience, and yet youth are going to be a little disturbed by that. But you have to think too, if there was a gun call or an actual, let's say there was a legit thing, do you want the police not to come? Do you want them not to show those kind of things to protect the community? Those are just a couple of questions. The second thing was, because we talk about the police, they did this, they did that. Has the community found the youth that banged on the doors, or were playing the, whatever they're doing? And has anyone talked to the youth and kind of reprimanded them and told them what they did? This is the result of what their little games do, right? So that's another thing too. It's like, as community leaders, we have to hold the youth responsible for what they did as well. But yeah, it's, games to them, but look what it did. It's their actions that actually caused the traumatic experience in the community. So I hope that these youth, someone could find them and maybe have a talk with them. So
I don't think the youth are the issue here. Sorry to interrupt, but I think you're sharing a lot of opinions that are actually discriminatory.
Oh no, actually not. These are all, everything here is all.
Sorry, sir. I don't want. Sorry, sir. I gave you space. If I can finish my comment.
Oh sure, yeah.
I think the issue here, I think what I've been hearing is actually not the youth, but the TCHC who organized the event. Had so many youth come in, didn't have the proper activities for them, didn't have them activated to participate in a way that they could design and properly organize. So TCHC had a lot of gaps here. And I really don't think this has anything to do with youth. I don't know if you have any children, but I think to even suggest that is preposterous and suggest that the way
I do have children.
Can I?
And I don't see in your comment, I don't see what I
sorry.
was saying was racist or anything like that. I'm just making statements.
It was racist because we don't want cops to show up in our neighborhood with rifles pointed at our youth for any reason.
Okay.
It's absolutely unacceptable.
Just to answer a few of the questions and just to simmer down the whole emotions here, and I get everybody's perspective, and I get what you're saying, Mark. Definitely the response, they made the call, they came, it's a situation where they're called for a knife, or it's not a knife, it may be multiple knives, and they handle the situation as, you'd expect the police to handle it. But the issue is like they said, right, there's multiple factors to it, right? TCH didn't do their due diligence in notifying them. The cops' aggression, even after, how can I say it, checking the youth who were, listening to their orders and sitting down in compliance, they were still aggressive even after the fact, and towards people who were on the sidelines as bystanders, just, trying to communicate and understand the situation, right? Because these are kids that are in their event. These are kids that are crying. And then the TCH person who called, the police said it was for a knife. And then the police said after that, they called for a Nikki 9-door. So what's the reality of it, right? And if that's the case, is there a false report made then? So then this is a TCH issue. Sorry, this is a resident issue as well, right? So we can point fingers at everybody. We can say TCH messed up. We can say the resident did what they're not supposed to do. And we can say that the officers, were very aggressive. And the kids, yes, but kids, like I said, they're young, they're still learning, they're still understanding the world, right? Not saying it's okay, but obviously it's some teaching points that we can give them. But the cops, they've been doing this for years. So what programs are they being put into? How are they being reprimanded by their communication process, right? Because if I'm talking to you in a civil manner, why you're being hostile to me, regardless of who it is, right? Because of the fact that we're trying to understand the situation, because it's an event, and if they haven't analyzed the room, that's the problem there, right? Because they're not analyzing that, okay, you know what, there is an event going on, there's 9 kids here, they must be from there. Although there isn't any notification from TCH that there was an event, that's no excuse regardless. The excuse is that, what are they doing? Are they doing their job correctly? And are they telling, are they doing the right steps, right? And obviously this is not the case at this point, right? So like I said, if we want to reprimand everybody, we can reprimand everybody, right? But at the end of the day, there has to be something done with these police officers to help them communicate effectively with residents to do their job correctly, because it's not needed, when they've analyzed the situation that there's 9 cops and there's 9 youth who are listening and crying and showing them all their pockets and giving them all their information, to have another 6 show up and have the assault rifle up or whatever it is, whatever tool you want to call it, right? Because at the end of the day, it's not necessary, right? We're trying to de-escalate the situation and they're making the situation worse than it is. So in that sense, I kind of say that this is a police issue, because literally that's the case. And TCH, yes, they have their faults. The kids have their faults, and the call has its faults. But I understand it from the residents' point of view, because we understand that police don't come, when they say, oh yeah, somebody's kicking my door, whatever. They're not gonna rush right away. But if you say, hey, there's a knife, oh my gosh, we're going there right away with assault rifles, and especially in Regent Park, hey, let's go. So that's the point I'm trying to get across. But I respect your opinion. I just think, you need to look more into it and understand from our point of view what's really going on in this neighborhood, because that's no excuse for an officer to do what they've done.
Well said, Kevin. Thank you so much for articulating that so well. There is a power imbalance. We can't equate children's actions to grown-ass adults. But I think it's very important for us to think about what privilege means. And especially, I'm going to ask other folks after we have our presentation from Noa Mendelsohn, who just joined us from the Canadian Civil Liberties Association. Welcome, Noa. Welcome to our meeting. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to talk about another issue, which is the hesitancy of youth to even put a complaint about this incident. So, for example, a complaint to the Ontario Police Independent OPRD, right? A lot of the youth were very, very concerned about repercussions for making a complaint. So we'll dig deeper as to why people feel that way. But let's go with Fatima, then Dini, then Marshida, and then after that, we'll have Noa present, and then we'll continue our conversation. Fatima, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in and, recognizing that TCHC isn't represented here this evening, and it's unfortunate that they weren't invited to be a part of this, because I think it's important that, they're able to also share facts that they have. So, I mean, one of the things that they've shared with me, and I think with a lot of others in the community as well, is that there was a lot of outreach done about this event. So it was postered all over the building, and sent out in communications to residents and all of that. So it's not that there wasn't any communications. I think it's really important that someone just point that out, that there was a significant amount of communication. And I, again, just think it's a pity that TCHC wasn't invited to be part of this evening.
So, Fatma, just to answer your question, this is a community event, so anyone is welcome to join us. We have folks from TPS that joined us, folks from yourself, like from Daniel, who joined us, and other stakeholders.
Yeah, no worries.
But we do have a community safety network that meets in January, and TCHC is a member of that network. So what we're hoping is from this conversation, take the recommendations and actually what residents want to that meeting. So this is going to inform that meeting, and we are confident that TCHC will be paying attention to that conversation. With regards to the lack of communication, I don't want you to misunderstand what was said earlier today. The lack of miscommunication was between TCHC and TPS, Toronto Police Services, not lack of communication as in when it comes to outreach. We do know they've done outreach. That's why a lot of youth came out, and there's a lot of youth groups that actually supported that outreach. What we're talking about is the lack of communication between TCHC and TPS about that event and how many participants will be there. And let's also find out, why does that have to be the case? Why is that the norm? Dini, go ahead, Marshida, and then Miguel, and then we're going to have Noa present. Dini?
Yeah, and we haven't heard anything from the staff inspector, which, because one of the things that doesn't sit well with me is the fact that so many, it's like how many for how long? It's the, amount of police resources that was used for that call, and how long it took when it was discovered that it wasn't the serious issue that they had been deployed, you know, expecting that could happen. Why did they not reduce the number of officers on site? You know, it's, to me, we hear all the time about the limited resources of police and the shortage and that they're stretched to the limit. Well, then why leave that number of officers at an incident that has been proven they know it's a prank, and they know that there's not a bunch of armed, violent youth that they have to contend with. Why weren't those officers on site reduced at that point, and the other officers go off and do the work that's out there to do? This is the part that doesn't sit well for me. Like, what was the point, and why misuse the resources in such a way?
Okay, thank you, Dini. Very excellent point. Marshida, you want to go next?
Yeah, Waleed, thanks. It's because I've been hearing stuff because I was in that space when I wasn't there when the incident happened, but I was there before that. They have well planned for the youth, and they did inform the community. I know this is going to happen. The only thing I would say, the TCC probably didn't inform the police. Yes, that's wrong. At the same time, as a person I was in the building, it didn't happen in one floor or one apartment. I'm sure what's the reason resident did it, probably made that call. We need to understand point of view as them as well. And I wish, I think I already spoke to you. I wish you can give me both sides of the stories and then, you know, present it, and I would appreciate it. And because the thing is, it's not only, I feel like I know what they did was, the situation was really wrong, but because they did it for a reason, right? If you could also give the other side of the story, I would greatly appreciate it.
Okay, thank you so
Thanks.
much, Marshida. We are going to show the actual incident. It was captured and circulated over social media, but it's also on Regent Park TV. But before we get started, I'm going to ask Noa to quickly present. I know we don't have for a lot of time. Noa is, so give me 1 second. I'm just going to quickly introduce her. So we have Noa from the Canadian Civil Liberties Association. Welcome. Noa is going to be quickly sharing a resource that they have. So Noa is the Equality Director of the Canadian Civil Liberties Association, has been with the organization since 2002. Noa has stewarded CCLA's litigation in courts across Canada, from human rights tribunals to the Supreme Court of Canada, on such issues as racial profiling, refugee protection, LGBTQ, on such issues as LGBTQ rights, reproductive justice, freedom of expression and religion, and intersectionality. Noa also advocates before government bodies and legislative committees and seeks to enhance public engagement through appearances like today, publications, media, and public education. So thank you so much, Noa. And I will stop sharing the screen, and you do have co-host status, my friend. So if you want to share the resource, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Waleed, and thank you everybody for having me join you at this event. I understand that there was something very concerning that happened in your community, and I think it's so impressive that you're coming together as a community to talk about it, to address it, to look for solutions. So before I continue, I just want to make sure that you can hear me clearly.
Yes, we can.
Great. So the reason Waleed invited me was not to address this specific incident, which I understand that you're doing as a community and collectively, but to share with you something that is also related to community safety, to policing, to racial profiling, that might also be important for you to know about now and going forwards, perhaps even now. And it is a Know Your Rights guide, an interactive website on racial profiling and police stops that is also an issue that sometimes affects members of Black, Indigenous, other racialized, other marginalized communities. Perhaps you would even call the incident that happened in Regent Park a series of police stops or one big police stop. So this may even be relevant to how you look at it and assess it. So I want to share it with you now. I'm going to put it up on the share screen, and Waleed, you'll just let me know when you guys can see it. Give me 1 second. Okay, I've loaded it. Let me know when you can see it.
We can see it.
We can see it.
Wonderful. So this is a website that we launched just last week, and it is intended for anybody. And by anybody, we know who is generally targeted by police in these situations, or generally stopped in these situations, is primarily young, primarily male, Black, Indigenous. A lot of Indigenous young women are stopped as well. In situations that are outside of ordinary, what we think of as ordinary law enforcement, what we think should be ordinary law enforcement. In other words, where there's no reasonable suspicion to stop somebody, and police say to somebody, who are you, where are you going, what are you doing, or ask for ID, put it in the database. This is sometimes known as carding, it's sometimes known as street checks. We've called it police stops to try and address the general phenomenon. And we think it's important that people know about your rights. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. So I just want to run you through some of the things. There's actually a lot of content on the website. So we've broken it down and broken it down again in an effort to make it feel accessible, because the information here is written in a way that hopefully will be accessible to people. So under the introduction, and I'll click on it in a moment, but I just want to show you, you have, how can this guide help me? So this sort of explains what the guide does. And I want to show you here on the side, if you're like me, you may have a little Zoom screen that you want to close, because I want to show you as much of this as possible. On the side here, and you're going to see the same thing repeated, your rights are only part of the story. And here we're going to talk about, and we're going to say it over and over again, to protect yourself and reduce risk, you need to use your own good judgment. You need to remain calm, be polite. And if you want to take action, and I'll talk in a moment about taking action, I promise, but if you want to take action, you may want to wait until you are no longer with the police, near the police, before you do anything. So that is not a legal recommendation. That is based on many community consultations that we have had over time with young people, with communities, with teachers, with parents. And this is what we're hearing from them. So what's in the guide? I'll just run you through the 3 check marks. It can answer questions that you have, but it also may answer questions that you didn't know to have. And that's why, if possible, it's a good idea to read through as much of it as you can. And it will give you new ideas about what you can do. In other words, what kind of action you might be able to take. So that's the very first part of the introduction. But then there's also definitions. What is racial profiling? What is carding? What is street checks? I think a lot of, pardon?
Go ahead.
Okay, I think a lot of people may have experienced carding and street checks, but for those who don't, we want to explain that. How do we know racial profiling exists in Canada? We've included a lot of the data that has been made available through different reports, and that's something you can look at for yourself. Again, I think people within racialized, marginalized, over-policed communities, this is perhaps not information that you need, but there will be other people who look at the website as well. This section on where do police get their powers and where do my rights come from, we think it's important that people understand that you do have a lot of rights in law. Whether or not you're able to exercise them in the moment of a police stop is a big question, and people's safety is a concern. But the fact that the police powers come from law and are limited by law, that police are not superheroes that are getting, from the planet Krypton or whatever, is important to remember, because it also means that police powers are limited by law. And that doesn't necessarily mean you can do anything about it in the moment, but it means you can pay attention and write things down afterwards and take action afterwards if you're concerned about what happened in the police stop. And I'll just scroll down to the bottom of the screen. We actually have this at the bottom of every single page on the website. Stay safe, use your best judgment. And so this is the same message. It's good to know your rights, but in the moment, it's a good idea to be calm, polite. You should be able to recognize when your rights have been violated and think about when to take action, perhaps when you're no longer with the police. and also that the information we're presenting in the guide is not legal advice. But we do have lots of information about how to find legal advice if you want to. And the final thing in the introduction, acknowledgement and thank yous. We have a land acknowledgement, but I also want to point out that we did consult with, we consulted with some criminal defense lawyers who were really helpful. And we also consulted with parents, teachers, community members, activists, and advocates. We've been consulting with them for years, and we consulted with them and got reviews specifically on this guide. And that was really important to us, of course, because we're trying to be allies, to be supportive, and to amplify the concerns and respond to the questions that we've heard over the years. So once you get into the actual meat of it, first of all, what are police powers? What powers do they have? Can they break the law? Can police lie? I'll leave that to you. As I said, there's a huge amount of content on the site. We won't go through it all tonight. You'll have the opportunity to do that here. But if you're interested, perhaps on another occasion, we can go through it. My rights section is probably one of the most important sections that you can read. And each of these questions is going to lead you to further questions. So first of all, there's a distinction between police stops and the right to walk away. So first of all, are you even being detained? If police stop and ask you a question, do you have to stay there, or can you keep walking? And that's really important. If you're being detained and you try and walk away, you're not allowed to. If you're not being detained, you should be allowed to walk away. And there are only those two options in law. There's no such thing in law as just having a conversation that is some no man's land. If you're having a conversation with a police officer and you do not want to be in that conversation and you want to go and be somewhere else, you should, by law, have the freedom to do that unless you're being detained. So that's really important, but also important to know that being stopped, and even if you have to stay with police because you're being detained, is a completely different question than whether you have to answer those questions. So to be clear, you might be detained and you might have the right to walk away, but also, even if you're detained, you still have the right to silence. And I want to talk about that just for a moment, because the right to silence, again, is not something that you want to take lightly. And most criminal defense lawyers and many parents might say to you, even if you don't have to provide your ID or name, and there are circumstances like that, many circumstances like that, and you certainly don't have to answer questions, many defense lawyers are going to say to you, if you give your name and your address, you can probably, unless there's criminal activity that police have a reasonable suspicion about and they're going to put you under arrest, in all likelihood, you're going to be able to leave and walk away. So that might actually be the safest choice for you, even if you have a right to silence. As for answering other questions, most criminal defense lawyers will say not to answer any other questions without a lawyer present. Many parents might say something a little bit different. They might say, if you can answer basic questions truthfully, answer them so that you can come home safely. Because police officers are also young. They are also, perhaps their adrenaline is up. They might also be feeling some kind of challenge or threat to their authority and what they think they should be able to do. And they do not like being challenged. So a lot of parents will say to their kids, answer questions. And this is not something for me to tell you, obviously. This is a conversation that you'll be having within your own families, within your own community. But for the most part, you do have a right to silence and you do not have to answer questions. And it is generally a better idea not to answer too many questions without a criminal defense lawyer there. So these are complicated issues, but we have gone through it. And as I said, we've gone through it with members of the community. We've gone through it with criminal defense lawyers so that we can try and provide you the best information you can, and that your kids can, and your neighbors can, and your cousins can, and your friends can. And ultimately, our hope is that people will feel safer and feel like they know what they can do. So this is the section, for example, if the law does not require me to give my name and ID. What are my options? Right, and this is where we go through it. What you can do legally, what defense lawyers will tell you, what parents will tell you, and what we recommend is not to make legal decisions without a lawyer. So that's a little bit about what your rights are. Now, if you are detained or arrested, then you have special rights, and we've listed them all here, and you can go through them, okay? And they're quite extensive. Also, under my rights, we've talked about search and seizure and the difference between consent and non-consent. So if a police officer says to you, show me what's in your pockets, and you do, if you don't agree to the search, but you feel like the safest thing to do is to show the officer that you have nothing in your pockets or nothing in your bag or whatever it is that they're asking to look at, you can both show it and say, if you feel like it's a safe thing to do, I don't consent to the search. So that's the kind of information you're going to find here. Again, there's really a lot of information. We also have a section here on security officers and mall guards and about what kind of powers they have. We've also talked about driving stops because there are special rules in driving stops, and generally you do have to give your name and ID when you're driving. And also driving stops, police officers do not need a reason in advance to stop you. They are allowed to stop people arbitrarily, meaning for no reason. And that is a detention, and you do have to stay. And that's important to know.
Did that change recently with regards to the
No.
driving stop?
No,
Wow.
no. Police are allowed to stop you to ask for your license without having any reason based on your driving. They're allowed to pull you over randomly to give you a breath test. That is a recent change to check for impairment, and the fact that they can do that arbitrarily, that is a recent change in the criminal code.
And what are the
So there are
consequences? What are the consequences if you're not a citizen, Noah?
That's a big question. There was an incident not long ago involving the OPP that was working together with CBSA, the Canada Border Services Agency, that they were doing stops together, where police were using their random stopping powers to stop people on highways in neighborhoods where they believed that there might be people with irregular immigration status. And then when they asked them for their ID, Canada Border Services Agency was right there so that they would get that information. We think that that is extremely improper, and we do not think that that is a lawful use of police powers. So, but I think that the question is a good one as well, because it takes us to one of the things I wanted to talk about. And I'll take it back to driving stops rather than anything else, but it's true for a lot of other things as well.
Just before we go forward, can I ask one other question?
Sure.
As it relates to this, in terms of the youth that were 14 years old, you know, can they consent, and don't they need a guardian and, you know, in the vicinity?
These are all really good questions. Some of them we have answers to in here. We do have answers about being detained as a minor, that if you're questioned as a minor, if you give a statement as a minor, you should have your parents or an adult who's responsible for you. We've got the exact definition in the guide there. So yes, that is the case. Now, police will often say, this isn't a detention. We just came in and asked people questions. They're free to go. Now, you and I both know that if a police officer in uniform with a weapon, several police officers in uniform with a weapon come and stop somebody and say, we want to talk to you, we all understand that 14-year-olds are not going to go anywhere, that they are not going to feel like they are free to go. And the law recognizes that to some extent. I would say that the law has not, that the courts have not done a good enough job of making it clear enough to lower courts and to police that this is the case, that if you have young people who have less power, who are racialized, who are teenagers, who are scared, who are looking at somebody with a weapon, they're not staying there voluntarily. Why would they want to have a conversation with officers in that circumstance? So there is some recognition on the parts of the court that that is probably not a voluntary stop, that they feel psychologically detained, and that is a form of detention if you don't feel like you are free to go. But there are a lot of things in the law that are not yet clear, and there are things that change. And one of the ways in which we put this guide together was trying to make it clear to people like yourselves and communities like yours that there is still more advocacy that needs to be done. So, pardon? So one of the things, for example, that we think more advocacy needs to be done around is this question of detention. And if police come and talk to you, it should be really clear to you that you're free to walk away. But more than that, police should not just be stopping people randomly or arbitrarily without a reason and talking to them, because people don't feel like they can get up and walk away. So that's one of the areas where we think there is a need for advocacy. Another area is the arbitrary power of driving stops. The Canadian Civil Liberties Association is intervening in a case coming out of Montreal in which a very young Black man is challenging the police powers to stop drivers arbitrarily, because we know what actually happens. What actually happens is when you give police that kind of power to use their discretion, it's the young Black men who are getting stopped. It's the Indigenous young women who are getting stopped. It's the racialized people who are getting stopped. That's what's happening over and over again. So those powers have consequences for communities. And again, you don't need me to tell you this, but I'm just sharing the information that we do know and that the research is telling us and the reports are telling us. So there too, there's room for advocacy. So I don't have much time left. I want to talk about this section because these are the ones that are really important as well. If you are interested in advocacy, if you are concerned about what happened in your community, if you are stopped by an officer and you're walking down the street, or they said, show me what's in your pockets, but you didn't consent to that search. And maybe you said, I don't consent, or maybe you felt scared and you didn't say it, but you weren't thinking like, I want to show you what's in my bag. What can you do about it? What can you do about it as an individual? What can you do about it as a community? So first of all, you can see here under what can I do? First of all, we talk about what is a rights violation or unfair treatment. We talk about the option of filming police stops and the fact that basically you can, but there are certain circumstances you'd want to be careful. I want to take you through just quickly, should I take notes during an interaction with police? And our recommendation, this is not a legal answer. This is what can you do if you want to be an advocate for yourself or for somebody that you're with who's getting stopped. A lot of people would consider it not safe to take notes while you're with the police, but every detail that you can remember as soon as that interaction is over, if you write it down, that's going to be really important. And if you talk to a lawyer, or if you talk to a legal clinic, or if you go to the Human Rights Commission to make a complaint about discrimination, because a stop of a racialized person is a form of discrimination, if it's based on race, even if it's unconscious racial bias, these are some of the questions that you can be asking yourselves, or that people in your community can be asking themselves about the stop, right? Who are the officers? Who was around at the time? Who saw what was going on? What happened? What was the result? Were you charged? Were you detained? What kind of questions did they ask? Did they take your ID? Did you get a ticket afterwards? Did you get a receipt afterwards? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So all those questions are here in an effort to help anybody who has been in an interaction like this, including the one that happened recently in your community, take down the information, keep a record of it, try and keep it in chronological order so it'll be easy to piece back and understand it if you need to share it or if you need to get more information. And then the other piece is under what can I do? So it's taking notes. If you're injured, what can you do? What is my best time? We've talked about it. What kind of action can I take? I want to run this one through you as well. So there are essentially a few main things you can do. Speaking to a lawyer sounds really expensive and impossible. That's often the case, that's true. But there are community legal clinics, there are legal aid clinics where it may be possible to get information, or if somebody thinks that what happened with them and police might actually be bad enough that they deserve compensation, a young person might not know that, a community member might not know that, but there are lawyers in most provinces, including in Ontario, this is a national guide, who will speak to you for 20 minutes and provide a consultation for free. And that information is available through the Law Society of Ontario. And I'll show you that link in a second. So that's option number one, is speaking to a lawyer. Secondly, filing a complaint against the police. Now, I know a lot of people do not have faith, and for good reason, in the police complaint system. And also a lot of people don't feel safe filing a police complaint because they're worried about retribution. The OIPRD is an independent body, and it was intended to make people feel safer. But I understand why you wouldn't want to take a risk with something that doesn't feel particularly useful, on the one hand. On the other hand, imagine what would happen if every single person in the community filed a complaint. Imagine what would happen if every time people were stopped, there were complaints. And then afterwards, advocates and communities and activists could say, okay, let's do a freedom of information request and find out about all these different complaints. There'd be a lot of useful information that otherwise we don't know about. Because every person who is walking down the street, having done nothing wrong, who gets stopped and asked questions by police, if there are no charges laid, nobody's going to know afterwards about that interaction unless that person does something. And I'm not saying that they should, and I'm certainly not accusing anybody for not taking action. I can understand why people don't feel safe, but also by not taking action, nobody knows about it. There is no record created. So that's something to think about, whether a community wants to keep its own records or you want to do it through police complaints or through some other mechanism. This one's really important. Making a human rights complaint. Human rights in Ontario is what you do when you feel like you've been treated with discrimination. So if you believe that a police stop is based on conscious or unconscious racial bias or some other form of bias against somebody who is street involved, or somebody who is trans, or somebody who uses certain kinds of drugs, which is a kind of disability, there is a human rights legal support center. And again, I'll show you the link for where to find that information, where you can ask for help to assess whether or not you have a complaint of discrimination, and you can file it, whether you're seeking compensation or whether you're seeking some other kind of action. And by compensation, by the way, I mean money, right? A lawsuit for money. So there are lawsuits for money, there are claims of discrimination for money, or also to say police should be doing things differently. And the Legal Support Center, you can call them and get help for free, at least an initial phone call. Suing police or taking other legal action we talked about, and for that you need to consult with a lawyer. And of course, connecting with others and working collaboratively in a community. So the last thing, if you don't mind, I'll do, and then I'll take some questions, is who do I contact? So if you're looking for a lawyer, I'll show you this one. We have it by province. Okay, so first of all, you can see all the different options on the side so you don't lose track. If you're somewhere where it's against the RCMP, like it's not relevant for you, so don't worry about that. So let me show you Ontario. If you want to contact a lawyer, the Law Society of Ontario has this website. So you could just email them, or you can click on this, and I want to actually show it to you and show you what's here. And then they explain that they have this lawyer referral service that you can call up, that you can get usually 20 minutes or up to 30 minutes free consultation to help you determine your rights and your options, and a link for how you can do that, and then frequently asked questions. So that's a really good source. And I've taken myself right off the site, and with the showing my app, I can't get back. Give me 1 second. Hold on 1 second, folks. Sorry about that. Okay. And then, so that's lawyer referral service. Complaints about discrimination. Again, it's different province by province. So if you go down to Ontario, Human Rights Legal Support Center, the information is there, and that's where you'll be able to file a complaint. Complaints against police. If you wanted to file a complaint, you could do it. Again, we've done this province by province because that's how it works. And that would be up to you to decide if that's something you want to do. That's the Office of the Independent Police Review Director. It is possible also to go to police station. We didn't put that in the guide because we know most people would feel more comfortable going to the independent body. And there's even a site for complaints about security guards. And there are also other legal resources here There are a whole lot of resources that you can try in Ontario. Now, I want to be clear, this is not a perfect answer, but it's a start. And it means that there are things that if you read through the guide, that the law is doing right, but doesn't necessarily happen right in practice. And so there you may want to take action. And there are other places where the law needs to be brought up to speed. And there too, we need information, courts need information, complaint bodies need information, human rights bodies, the ones that are dealing with discrimination definitely need information so that we can make change. And so all of that, hopefully we've included in the guide. And that's what I wanted to show you. And I'm sorry, I've taken up much more time than I said that I would. So I will stop here and answer a couple of questions. If there's time, Waleed, and if you want to go back to your conversation, I'm of course happy to turn that back over to you.
Noa, you are such a valuable resource to our community. Thank you so much for that presentation. That was amazing. I feel like we should just do a completely different event on Know Your Rights just based on that presentation. I also want to acknowledge that you referenced Section 7 of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms with regards to interactions. That was very important. You also shared resources that community members could tap into, but there's a lot of questions. I was just wondering if we could just maybe take 2 brief ones and then have the rest of the folks speak, because we're at 7:40 and we need to end at 8 o'clock, okay? So I'll just maybe take these 2 questions. One regarding complaints about the CSU in TCC might be different. So the special constables, and some folks might think they're police officers, but they do have special powers. So maybe you could talk about that. And maybe what we could do is do our homework and find out what the complaint process looks like for those special constables. So that's the first question. And then the second thing is, are there any supports with regards to people that want to put forward a complaint? So does the Canadian Civil Liberties do that? Is there another organization that do that? Or is it left to community organizations to do that? So maybe those 2 questions, and I promise that we'll invite you in the future for much broader conversation. Go ahead.
So first of all, thank you. You're very kind, and I would be very happy to come back and talk in more detail and do a Know Your Rights session for people who are interested. And I know that this is generally what communities want to hear. How do they protect their rights? Which you should. I mean, they are your rights. And they should be protected. They should be protected by the police. That's part of their job. How do people complain about special constables? I don't have a clear answer to that. I would need to take a look, but I believe that the police complaint system should be the same for officers, whether they're special constables or not. But I think you would need to check that with the OIPRD. That was the first question. What was the second question, Waleed? I want to make sure I get it right.
Yeah, so apart from the special constables one, the second question was regards to organizations that support complaints or support the process for those
Right.
that want to make a complaint.
So, I mean, we can talk about this in greater depth if we decide to have another gathering. The resources that I showed you very briefly on the guide actually take you through some of the bodies that are available to help. So, for example, if you have a complaint of discrimination, if you feel like you were discriminated against by virtue of being stopped and being a young Black man and you're driving and you've been stopped 3 times or twice or even once for no reason, and it doesn't look like anybody else was stopped, you could call the Human Rights Legal Support Center. So the human rights complaint is for people who have a claim of discrimination. That is somewhere that you can seek compensation, financial compensation, but also for changes in how police do their jobs. That's what's known as a systemic remedy when you're trying to actually change the system. And the Human Rights Legal Support Center has a call line and they support those claims. Depending on what your complaint is, what your issue is, they may be able to provide more than just an answer on the end of a telephone. In certain rare cases, they will provide a lawyer to help take that claim all the way through. And that might even include if a community says we had a massive incident in our community, if somebody were to call the Human Rights Legal Support Center, it is possible that the support would go to filing forms. It is possible the support would go to just answering questions. And it is possible that they say, this is so important. We're going to take our very limited resources and assign a lawyer to help take this claim all the way through. So that's for discrimination claims. And that is on our guide under Take Action and Where Do I Find Help? How can I find help? The legal resources also lists community clinics and legal aid clinics that are available. And so that too, you will find on our guide the various supports that are available. The Canadian Civil Liberties Association, we are a very tiny organization doing the best we can. We do not have it in us to help individual issues and complaints. I wish we did, but we don't. But we do look at systemic issues and we try and address sort of reforming the law. Okay. And so people do write to us. Usually we're not able to help individuals. So that's where the legal clinics are most helpful, or speaking to a lawyer. But if there's something in the system that needs to be changed, it is helpful for us to know about it. And so, for example, if we had another community meeting and if folks had a chance to talk in advance and say, these are some of the systemic things that come up over and over again that we think need to be fixed, I would be very interested in meeting with you and hearing from you about it. And there's work that we can do together.
Thank you, Noa. Thank you for that offer. We really appreciate the support you provided us tonight. And thank you so much for pushing for systemic changes, systemic reforms, so that we as communities have the legal protections to live with integrity. So thank you, Noa. Please thank Noa from the Canadian Civil Liberties Association for joining us today. Thank you, Noa. We're going to
Thanks, Walid.
You're welcome.
And I will send you, sir, I will send you the link to our guide if you don't already have it, so that you can share it with people in the community.
Perfect. Thank you, Noa. We'll email it for
Thank
sure.
you.
We have Miguel, Ines, and King next. I'm going to ask you folks to be brief because at about 7:55, we want to make announcements and move on to the next of the stuff. So Miguel, go ahead.
Yes, my question was an answer to one of the participants with regards. TCAC is not here to answer the questions. Well, the fact of the matter is we did invite a TCAC to come today. If they're not here, it speaks volumes why they have not chosen to be here tonight. That's it I had to say. I want to go for the record.
Thank you for the comment. We'll move on to Ines. Go ahead, Ines.
Hi, everyone. I sit in the Regent Park Safety Network. I just need to say something about that because Regent Park Safety Network, me being as a backup co-chair, it was attacked a lot. As a tenant, we cannot do that much, but I know TCAC staff and crisis response have been dealing with this matter behind the scene. And they've been doing, and they send an email to everyone in the safety network. We're gonna have a safety network meeting in January 17, 5:30 to 7:30. We will send the link and everything, and it is in our agenda to talk about this. And like I said, safety network, TCAC and crisis response have been dealing with this. Us as a tenant, we don't have that privilege. We do talk, but we don't have, they will not tell us that much of information of being as a tenant. So I just needed to say this in here because people think that we're not doing, safety network is doing nothing. Actually, we are doing a lot of the work as a Regent Park Safety Network. So I just had to put that in there because it's not very nice when you're being attacked and saying that we don't do nothing and we don't care for the youth. We do care. We are doing a lot of stuff. And it's just when things are said and the way they're being put and knocking us as a tenant, saying that we don't do the work and we don't care about the youth, it's not very nice when you're trying to do all this the right way. Because remember, these are youth that it's happening to. There is a way to do things only with the youth. Sometimes our mouth are making it worse for our youth. And how do we deal with this situation? And how do we go about? There's a way of doing things, not just putting everything, okay, let's go guys, and we're doing this, this and that, and making matters worse and worse. Where are the parents of the youth? I don't know if any parents are here talking for on behalf of their kids who were minor there. So there is things that needs to be step by step. and the right way. And I understand we all want to do things in a rush, but it has to be the proper way, things that need to be done. Not putting those youth more at risk that they're already traumatized with this event. Thank you.
Okay, King, go ahead. Your Majesty, you're next.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry. My view on this issue is this. The real solution for all this is to go after John Tory. John Tory sits on the police board himself. If you want to make real change, you go directly at the neck of John Tory. You take children, you go to City Hall, and you videotape it and say, listen, we want to speak to the mayor. If they don't let you speak to the mayor, you put it on TikTok, you put it on Instagram, you send it to SixBuzz. Remember, these people don't want the bad publicity to say that they're not willing to talk to the youth. Then when you do get the door open, you still record and you say, listen, because of your foolish mandates that don't make sense, right? And you bring the statistics so he can't argue with the numbers because that's how they want to play these foolish games. You say, listen, domestic abuse has gone up, violence in the home has gone up. There's been no community spaces for people that are unvaccinated because for some reason, there's no, the health administration thinks that we're the disease and the disease spreader, but there's no facts based on these allegations. Show me the proof, show me the numbers that says that the non-vaccinated people are the reason why COVID or Delta or Omicron, whatever garbage they want to put up with next, is the reason why this so-called virus is lingering around. You tell them, listen, we want spaces for the kids to play. We are also tax-paying citizens. So if you're going to allow people that are vaccinated, you should also make a place for people who are unvaccinated. This medical apartheid nonsense has to end because what it's affecting is the youth, no one else. What do you think youth are going to do when they're bored and they have energy to burn? Obviously, they're going to do stupid things. Everybody has to go through that as a child. I played Nicky Nando's as a child. Like, it's what people do when they're bored and they're restless. And this is not going to help. This is how you create real solution and affect real change. You go to the source. Like, the cops are just the minions. Basically, they're just minions. They're being told what to do, how to do it. And some of them don't even like, their staff members that they have to work alongside. So to be honest, the best way to get your opinion across is to go after John Tory. Go directly after John Tory and say, listen, you always talk about diversity and inclusion and how important the youth is. Okay, show us. Put your money where your mouth is. Because for experiment to be safe and effective, and to say that, you're not going to show us the facts of, each shot until 2096 when we're all dead, that's ludicrous. That is absolutely ludicrous. So for the people at Regent Park that are dealing with the children, I say you tell them this. Tell them King said, you guys get together in a group, go with a youth leader who is actually passionate, and that's not going to, that's not going to cower it out at the doors. And you record yourself going to City Hall saying that we're the youth from Regent Park. We want to speak directly to the mayor. And if they ask you why, just say it's a matter of the mayor. We're not here to, play broken telephone. We're here to speak to the mayor on a pressing issue in our community. That's it. And I'm telling you, once you put that out there and the world sees how the children of Toronto, the inner city of Toronto, are being treated, the mayor will have to come out. He won't be able to hide behind any black gatekeepers, trust me. And when he does send a black keeper, you tell that black gatekeeper, we're not here to speak to you, we're here to speak to the mayor. And if they ask you what for, oppression issue from Regent Park. What's the oppression issue? That's for the mayor to know. We want to speak to the mayor. And that's that. You retweet it, you hashtag it, and I guarantee you, this guy will not be able to hide behind anybody. That is the real solution, and that's how you go forward from this. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, King, for speaking with passion and speaking to action. And we're actually going to be concluding this meeting on those points. But before we do that, Kevin, go ahead.
Yeah, I just had, a few additions to that, and just to end it off as well. And I think it's more directed towards Mark just because he's on behalf of the TPS as well. I know you agreed with what the response was. I just want to understand, what the protocol is, how we understand, the situation and, the gravity of the situation, the risk on your behalf as an officer, right? And how you dictate, what the response should be at that point and ongoing. And on top, I guess, to what Noah was saying as well, like in response to, youth, you said that, they did a great job of responding to it, but do you think it was fair in that case to search them, right? I just want to hear your response towards that, or whatever information you have there, right? Just because you were privy to the event, you seen what had happened, and you have a lot of information towards that.
Awesome. Excellent question. Go ahead.
Sorry, that question was for me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, so someone calls 911 and says there's a weapon, right? So police are dispatched, right? They don't know who has the weapon, how many people have the weapon, or even descriptions of the people, possibly, right? So they're going to send as many people as they can to try to make the situation safe, to look for a potential suspect. And so if there's, in the situation that happened down in Regent Park, so you have, caller calls in, bunch of people, potential knife, and there's a bunch of youth around, right? And they don't know that on the call. We don't know that if it was like if it was youth or whatever. They just said that there was knives, so there could have been a weapon. So they go down, and so you have all these people down there. You have a massive area, multiple exits, a lot of people down there. They don't know if anyone's injured. They don't know if anyone has a knife. That's what they're assuming, because that's what the call was. So they have to do the investigation. So if they're going to be, they get a call for a possible weapon and there's people there, they're going to probably want to search pockets and to make sure that there is no weapon on these people. So I don't see how unreasonable that is. The protocol was followed to the T, right? And so I know someone said that, there was, because the call was, for 5 black males with knives, and that's why they came out with the weapons. It wasn't because they were black. They came because there was a weapons call. That's what it was. There was a weapons call. It wasn't a racial thing. It was a weapons call. So, I don't know how that becomes a racial thing. I don't know how I become, racist by just mentioning that. It's kind of ludicrous. This happens all throughout the city. It happened at Yorkdale. There was a shooting. There was a weapons call. The cops came, right? It happens all over the city. It's not unique to your neighborhood. It's sad that it happens anywhere, and it sucks that it happens. And I'm not going to say that there's racism doesn't exist. It actually does exist, and I acknowledge that. So I don't understand why we're going around the circle thinking like the police didn't do what they were supposed to. They did exactly what they're trained for. They did it to the T.
Yeah,
so,
and I definitely understand that point. And like I said, the response was necessary. It's the after that's in question, right? They're how they analyze the situation after they understood that there was no weapon, because as you said, they checked them. They checked youth, and at the end of the day, they didn't find anything, right? So the question is why, in terms of, having all the officers there, having that assault rifle or whatever, tool it was, that communication towards, community leaders, the response from the beginning is understood. How they analyze the situation thereafter, that's the issue in question.
Problematic.
Yep.
Very,
What do we have?
because this is something that, like I said, could have, gone south, it could have gone differently, right, as well, right? But I think in terms of how they responded to community leaders who were asking questions, how they, searched the youth, and found nothing, but didn't try to de-escalate the situation. At one point, you're 50% right, or I'd like to say maybe 30% right, but the 70% of the situation, you're incorrect. Because after that, they definitely did not analyze the situation. They didn't try to de-escalate, and they didn't try to, do their due diligence, right? After they've realized that there is no weapon, it was a false call, because it was a false call. They called for a knife, and then they said, yeah, you know what? It was a ding dong ditch, and we may have seen a knife, because that's what they indicated to us during there. So it is on video, on the recording. So that's literally the issue at hand right here. And I just, like I said, I like to hear everybody's perspective. I like to understand, and I understand where you're coming from, right? You're seeing it from a different angle, from a different point of view. And I guess you're seeing how they responded from the beginning, but from thereafter, once they seen the kids and ongoing, they didn't respond as well to those youth who were crying, who were obeying and giving them all the information, and to the community leaders that were there as well.
Okay, let's go with Dini, and then we're going to have a last speaker after Dini. That's it, and we'll continue this conversation, I promise, in the new year, after following up with the task. So go ahead, Dini.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that many times in the past, youth workers in this community have had to talk with our division about the way that they communicate in regards to these situations. Again, it just, the youth have their youth workers there. It's like an adult presence of protection. And to have the police strip that away from them is another use of force that is completely unnecessary. So I know we used to meet over at 51 Division and do some training work with the officers. Youth workers were always involved in those sessions, to talk about protocol and how we, dignify and respect each other when we're carrying out our duties. Police are service providers too, just like youth workers are service providers. So there should be some mutual respect.
Well said.
So it might be time to revisit that.
Well said, Dini. Thank you so much. Our next
Could I
speaker, and then we're going to have
respond?
Leah, go ahead.
Sorry, I wanted to respond to Kevin. He did bring up some really important questions. So again, some of the youth leaders, as you saw, Yusuf joined in with all the youth. There's some of them that are actually on the call, Kevin being one of them, that were there. And again, it was very, it's like, it sits with you. It sits with you when a police officer disrespects you, when you speak up for yourself. So the issue that Kevin is bringing up is, after everything was said and done, all the aggression and whatnot, he simply said to an officer, okay, well, the sergeant on hand, who was very, very, he was disrespectful, let's just call it what it is, and said, Kevin's like, okay, he wasn't aggressive at all. None of the youth were aggressive, but because there's a lot of he say and what she's saying and what they're saying, it's a lot of broken telephone happening here. So, Kevin, I was there when Kevin did say, like the police, like, so all of this. So after everything was said and done, and it was a false call, everyone's kind of just waiting around. Like, there's so many police officers, the biggest scene, and like, not even an apology, just you just leave. And that's all Kevin said. Like, you have to see this as if something went left. Let's just say there was youth in their pocket getting there's 12-year-olds there, okay? They were nervous. And they were in their pocket trying to grab tissues to like wipe the sweat off their face. How about if an officer thought they're grabbing for a knife? We've seen where this has gone, right? We've seen when you have force, you know, something might, you know, we don't like to call these things out because it's, you know, but it happens, right? So let's just say something went left, and that's all Kevin, that was his perspective. Like, hey, something could have went left. That's all. Like, does the people that called this, the false call, do they get anything? Are they like, something could have happened to these youths? So when this was mentioned, we did, I know Waleed, you were present at the meeting with 51 division at the Regent Park Community Center.
Yes.
And this was brought up again, and the youth leaders came out to there too. And, you know, the sergeant that was there was very defensive. It's as if, and I almost understand why he was being defensive, because they were hearing so much of what happened, and it wasn't from the people that were there. So they're saying, we're hearing all of this. So by the time I got to ask him a question about, okay, I'm hearing the youth leaders were hostile. The person that was, you know, speaking and called out the sergeant was being hostile. They were not being hostile, right? So they're being defensive. They're being defensive because they're being attacked. And they're being attacked because the people, like, I understand, like, they might have not been in the right situation, but it's like the right steps needs to be taken. And that's why this meeting needs to happen, because again, the youth leaders are being targeted, and, you know, they're being put on this, they were being very respectful, and they're giving that story where they weren't being respectful. And that's a problem, because that's going to give them more ammunition to come with more force if something does happen in another instance. And now these youth leaders have all reason to feel intimidated, right? So again, back to what Kevin was saying, again, at the meeting, we talked to the superintendent. We talked to the superintendent. He wasn't a 51 division, but we did have a conversation with him and the NCOs that were present, Mustafa and Farzad, and they did mention, you know, as NCOs, they believe that the conversation should start with the youth leaders and the NCOs getting to know each other. And to start the conversation there, where at least if they know each other and a 911 call comes in, there's always going to be one NCO there. And I know there's members on here from, you know, the BCCC who understand more of this process and how it works when there's a 911 call, just as, you know, other people who comes to the scene. And if that's the case, our NCO is going to be there. So the thing is, the conversation there was no follow-up with that meeting that happened, right? Like, this meeting was, I think, the beginning of December. So it's like, where's the follow-up? The superintendent even called everybody out saying, I doubt there's going to be a follow-up after this. Don't just make this be another meeting, because that's all we do. We have meetings. The superintendent surprisingly was the one to say this. So what are we going to do moving forward? Who contacted the NCOs? Did the NCOs contact anybody? Like, this conversation is not continuing. It's just a blame game. It's like, we can blame TCHC, we can blame the youth for playing Nikki Nine Door, we can blame everybody, but who's actually going to be about positive change and what's going to happen of this? Because again, it's the residents and the youth that are going to end up suffering. So it's like, people got to like work together. The residents where the youth were there, like, everyone needs to work together and see, what do you do? What are the proper steps? Maybe the residents that live in the building need to know, you don't need to call. If your life's not being threatened, maybe 911 is not the best person to call, because the Toronto police are actually not allowed to go on TCHC property. So unless there's a 911 call. So there's actually systems already put in place where it's the TCHC safe officers who should get the call if it's not that serious, and then they take the steps if they feel like it's, you know, more of a serious situation. So just taking the right steps, but eventually just following up, having that conversation, call out the NCOs. If the NCOs are saying, we want to work with you guys, we want to get to know you guys, call them out. Okay, how do we do this? What's the next steps moving forward? So the youth leaders don't feel like they're being attacked and they're lesser than. And then, you know, there's this narrative being made that they're aggressive when we know they're not. they were far from aggressive. So what do we do next? Like, this is a meeting, but what is a follow-up? When are the NCOs going to be part of the conversation? When are the youth leaders going to all come together and say, okay, we are the youth leaders of Regent Park. What do we do to protect our youth? Because, you know, a lot of times youth at the age, they don't really want to go to their parents and tell them these things because, you know, a lot of parents are strict, who knows what it is, but parents are not always going to know. So youth leaders are the middle ground here, right? So it's like, and if the youth leaders are being disrespected in front of the youth, that's a problem. So it's again, and if everyone's going to play broken telephone, by the time it gets to the police, they're going to be defensive because everyone's going to protect themselves. TCHC is going to protect themselves. The city, police, that's what people do. They protect their image.
Yes, that is true.
So at the end of the day, it's taking the right measures, taking the right procedures, making the right protocol. This incident happened. Let's call out who needs to be called out. Let's take the right steps. A lot of people don't know that. And that's why these meetings are important, to see what are the right steps. How do we go about this? What do we do next? But let's not leave it. And that's why we had this meeting, because there's a safety meeting in January, but it's like, and this is something I hope the safety committee, you know, takes on, but and they follow this conversation, because like, we don't want to wait too long for these things to be called out, because it's just going to be, it's losing the importance of the situation. And we don't want this to happen again before something's being done about it. So again, if anybody wants to add to that, I know I went over the time, please do.
No, and just to quickly finish it off and just to give that information, like Leah, there was a great points there. And, you know, these community officers know us, you know, we've spoken to them to do programs or help them do programs. So they're aware of who we are. And if they say otherwise, I don't know what to add towards that. So that's why it's a bit more of an issue as well, because they should be addressing this stuff to their sergeant. But yeah, that's just what I want to add towards that.
Well said, Kevin. So we got Miguel wanting to speak to. Miguel, I'm going to make sure you speak as my friend. Don't you worry. But I just want to also prioritize chat, the comments in the chat made by youth and youth workers. So something very important was
super important
made by Yusuf, that the police acted defensively because they knew they messed up, even tried saying it's not illegal if you have a knife to the kids. Very strange. And then Abdul Fattah said, as I was trying to explain what happened to an officer, stopped me and said what I was saying was incorrect, looked to me as if he was trying to save the image of the police. So there's this very, it's an unhelpful climate where instead of actively listening to the youth, what we're hearing is police are being defensive, right? And that's seems to be a theme that we've been discussing today. Miguel, go ahead, and then I'm going to go through with the announcements and next steps. Go ahead, Miguel.
Okay. Probably my comments are with regards to next steps. I just want to point it out to you, as everybody said, and I agree. They will be defending themselves right, front, and left with their stories. The only way we have an alternative to prove them wrong is to file a freedom of information request to read the officer's notes with regards 50 Regent Park Boulevard, because the call was made to police. So that document, that information will help us to fight off any claims that the police will make in January 17, 2022. As we hear, they're working behind the scenes, as far as we know. They're going to be defending themselves and make up some kind of stories. But a freedom information request to the police will help us clarify this information, but it will take about 30 days to get a response or more.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Miguel. So let's hear from Juliet. I know you raised your hand briefly. Juliet from City Councilor Wong Tam's office. Do you want to say something quickly? Juliet?
Still don't have the email from Juliet.
Hi.
Hi, Juliet. Go ahead.
Mark, I just wanted to say a few things. Given you've heard what the community are saying, I know you had your own intention and you defended the police and their actions. But on the other hand, you're hearing from the people there and the community how the actions make them feel. Is it possible for you to take this back for your superior and let them know how the community actually felt, not the intention. Your intention probably were in the right place, but the community felt differently on how the issues was handled. Is it possible for you to take this back? Mark, are you there?
I'm not sure if Mark is with us, but it's a point taken. Thank you so much, Juliet, for raising that point. I just want to let people know, if you want to talk after this meeting formally ends, I will leave the Zoom meeting on. I know a lot of people want to say many things, so we'll make sure to accommodate for that. But let me quickly share the screen so that we could go through the rest of the program. So this was some questions that we hope to discuss, but we don't have time today. So we're going to move on to the next thing, which is the next steps. So the next steps are to participate in the next Community Safety Network meeting. It's on January 17th, as earlier announced. Also, contact your city councilor and MPP, so Councilor Wong Tam and MPP Suze Morrison, to hold those with the duty of care responsible. The email addresses are there. Also, support grassroots organizations and youth workers who are dedicated to supporting and advocating to eliminate systemic barriers for the youth, marginalized community members. Organizations like Youth Gravity, Healing Us One, Youth Empowering Youth, Football for All. Support those organizations because they're doing very important work in supporting youth. Also, endorse the statement of facts by the youth. I know Kevin, Leah, and many other folks, Yusuf, many other youth leaders are working with our youth to make sure that their voices are heard, that their voices are amplified, and that will happen through a statement of facts. So we look forward to reviewing the statement of facts and the demands by the youth, the requests coming from the youth, especially in light of this interaction. I also want to encourage you to join your neighborhood association, the Regent Park Neighborhood Association, and the many mutual aid pods organized by community members like you. We went through this. So quickly, community announcements. January 17, 2022, the SDP Safety Network will be meeting on Zoom from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. Please mark that on your calendar and join that meeting and support the requests coming from your neighbors, from our youth, with regards to holding everyone accountable so that we don't have interactions like this in our community. I know communities like Rosedale, and other privileged neighborhoods will never have experiences like this. And I want to make sure that Regent Park is a safe community, but where people are treated with respect. Another quick announcement is about the communication vaccination drive. So starting today, COVID-19 vaccines will be made available to 18-year-olds or older. So if you're looking for a booster or any of the doses, please send an email to myself at wali.k@gmail.com. with your first and last name, date of birth, postal code, email address, cell phone number, also gender. Youth and seniors are encouraged to get vaccinated. Also, please join your Community Benefits Coalition. This is a coalition of residents that are pushing for systemic solutions to the root causes of poverty by calling for a community benefits agreement with hard targets so that we could hire more youth, seniors, and equity-seeking residents, members of equity-seeking groups who are residents when it comes to phases 4 and 5. So get involved for your benefit, and it's very easy. That's a very beautiful photo. I don't know if you folks see Dini, Ines, I don't know who else is in this meeting, Miguel, myself. There's a bunch of folks. This is a meeting that we had where we signed a community benefits framework.
Waleed, the video, were you going to show the video?
We'll show the video in the end after this meeting is done. And I also want to share the contact information if you want to get involved with the coalition, rpna.info@gmail.com, Regent Park Coalition, and also on Facebook. Also get involved with the Neighborhood Pods Project, and that's the contact information on Twitter. And I just want to say thank you for joining our meeting today.
Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and check out all of our social media platforms. For more information, check out our website.
you.